Welcome to the Light Cellar podcast, brought to you by Light Cellar, a place where you can learn to find and craft your own food and medicine. In this interview series, you will meet a range of characters in the health and wellness space that are bringing light to your everyday. You'll hear from a number of different experts on a wide variety of topics. We have several different series within the podcast, including our Wild Wisdom and Storytelling with Blaine Andrusic, the Rays of Light, inspiring wellness in the community, plus solo casts, Q&As, and other topics for you to enjoy. You can find this as a video version, as well as the audio on any of your favorite platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with somebody you know who will benefit. You can also shop online at lightcellar.ca. Hey, welcome to Light Cellar Podcast. We have another special episode for you. It's brought to you by Light Cellar. You can go to lightcellar.ca. All that you need to help find and learn how to craft your own food and medicine. Today, I am joined by Sean Perrin.
How's it going?
Yeah, if you enjoyed our first episode, we had a great conversation.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, so we want to do this again. And we've pulled kind of as starting points for the conversation, maybe 20, 30 minutes, something like that. We'll kind of go through. We have pulled some questions from the YouTube channel. So if you've posted there or you want to do that in the future, this is kind of something that we'll do occasionally, be able to kind of get to those questions, answer a little bit more in depth. And I know that's going to lead off to some other topics that we'll be able to talk about.
Hopefully.
Dive into, so.
We'll see. So I'm basically going to pretend to be you guys in the comments there. So if you do have any comments or questions about any of the episodes, make sure to leave that below. And we'll try to get to them in due time on a Q&A episode like this one.
Yeah,
so,
right on. Okay, well, let's dive in.
You ready for the first question?
Yeah.
So this is from Christina Morales 6887. And she's referring to the Foraging Forecast, which is, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, totally. This is a kind of a nice little passion project that myself and Denis Manza are doing. So the Foraging Forecast, we're letting you know what to harvest, when to harvest, how, that type of thing in the local area. Now, there is people registered for this. It's kind of a monthly subscription. We've got people down in the States. We've got people northern Alberta into BC. It's primarily focused for those of us that are here in kind of central southern Alberta, tuned to this ecosystem, and it's really going to allow you the heads up of what to harvest, and most importantly when. Like, hey, we're right now in the season of, it's autumn time, and so it's all about roots and it's all about fruits. And the one that I'm sending out right now, I'm just kind of drafting it right up, is nettle seeds and nettle roots.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and just chatting with this lady today, she signed up for kind of the annual membership. It's $9 a month, and cheaper if you do the annual. So she's like, yeah, totally into it, love it. And it's kind of work at your own pace. We provide video content, written descriptions about the plant, again, where to find it, ideas where to go, how to harvest, what you can do with it. And so there's a bit of a written write-up, and then we do a video feature. So it's Denis and I or another special guest talking about the plants that are relevant, that are like popping off, like what can you harvest right now and for the coming weeks. So this goes all year round. You might think, well, what are you going to do in the winter?
So I was thinking that. I was going to ask that. Like, hey, what plants are popping off in January?
Well, you'll just have to wait till you get the
we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and my real goal with this, at least when it comes to the content, is not to overwhelm. So it's not like you're getting an email every single day. Here's 10 different things you can harvest. We're doing, 1, 2, 3 a week, which is plenty, honestly, to so it's manageable to okay, cool, I'm gonna focus on cranberry for this week or this month. Like, people can really develop an understanding of what's out in our backyards. It's a mix of urban foraging. We're incorporating things from gardens, maybe that you grow, or is it a community garden, or it's just kind of feral. It's just made its way into the ecosystem, as well as going out of town and seeing what's out there in abundance. So that's where where this question came from, because some of the episodes I've kind of posted publicly, but we've been going since April 2023, and there's been a number of episodes, I don't know, dozens and dozens of plants, and sometimes they'll revisit the same plant because, you know, at one time a year, maybe you're focusing on the leaf, another time it's the fruit or the seed or the root, so it's always changing, evolving, and having a lot of fun with it.
I guess that's 6 months now it's coming up on, 6 months of that. So the annual membership, if you're looking to join, I guess still a good time, anytime, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%.
Is this something that's for people who are new to foraging or seasoned foragers, or who would be best
great
to
question.
look into that?
Yeah, well, both, to be honest. Yeah, because foraging is so deep, it's so vast, it's a lifetime journey. So, you know, for myself, I've been into this for easily way more than a decade, 15, almost 20 years, and I still have so much to learn. And you can't do it all, right?
Yeah.
You can't learn it all, you can't harvest it all, but each year you build your repertoire, and certain years are going to be in the right time, the right place, and that plant is like, it's the year for it, right? And to have that in your kind of, you know, wheelhouse, you can take advantage.
It's so funny because this question is basically, are you respectful, or how can you be respectful and do foraging in a responsible way? And it's kind of a longer question, but sort of trying to honor the spirit of the plant and those who might also harvest alongside you, and I guess make it sustainable is sort of the core of that, right? So how might we go about that?
Yeah, totally, and great question. You know, we definitely hear that a lot, you know, a concern, and also sometimes just a criticism. People are like, you're taken from nature.
Yeah, there was another comment made me laugh. It was about the urban foraging one, though, and he said, well, isn't this just theft? Why don't you guys just go down to the grocery store and take what you need from there?
Yeah, it's true. Okay, fair comment, right? Yeah. At least in the urban foraging, you know, what we find is that, you know, we did an episode on apples, and, you know, there's an abundance out there that people have planted. You know, they might not have the time. They likely don't have the interest, you know, like, and it could just be a one-off where just somebody just can't get to it, right?
Totally.
So in letting that, instead of just letting it go to waste, you know, somebody could come along, and there's lots of little networks, and we give lots of tips and resources of like, you know, there's like fruit share programs, you know, go here and check it out, that kind of a thing.
Well, it helps just to ask. Go up to the door and, hey, I see you've got an apple tree, and if I brought you an apple pie, could I take some of your apples? I mean, that's
totally. Yeah.
You know, old-fashioned trade. That kind of
exactly.
thing. My mom did that one time. She went up to it, and the old woman was so happy. I used to harvest these, but I'm too old now, and my kids don't live here. And she brought her a couple of pies or whatever, and made some whatever, jam, jellies or something, and win-win.
No, totally. And it's a great way to build community, and it's a great way to, like, it's a conversation or opener, because I've also had it, people are like, what? Like, I didn't know what I had. And it's
didn't know those were apples.
Right, yeah. Or, you know, like, what? I have horseradish growing in my backyard?
Yeah,
like,
well, funny story. We've been doing those night cellar concert events with the feature food and all that in the evenings. And one woman there's these little planters outside if you've never been here, but with various things growing, and some of them look like weeds because you guys are growing what might be weeds to other people. And this woman had plucked out one of them and told, I think it was one of the staff, hey, look, I did some weeding for you. And she's like, oh, no, this is our, we use that or something.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, the thing. I mean, I've even texted you a couple of times like, hey, I'm out for a walk. I mean, can I eat this tree? You know?
Yeah.
And more often than not, there's something to do with it that I had no idea about. So
for sure. Yeah. So, you know, like kind of maybe addressing more of the theft thing. Well, there's an abundance out there, right? Yeah. And we'll get to that relationship with the land and, you know, between you and the plant. But first and foremost, there's an abundance out there, like we mentioned, that people aren't using or aren't aware of. There's also a ton of weeds. You know, the other interview series I do with Blaine and Druzik, he often makes that kind of remark, that comment that when he first started doing plant walks, and funny enough, he was hired by the city of Calgary, and what he did is he took the city's noxious weed list.
Wow.
And that was their plant list for the plant walk, right? Like, oh, let's go see Daisy. Let's go see Dandelion. Like all these things, right? Like the city's like, these are noxious weeds. We need to eradicate them. He's like, hey, here's the medicine of, you know, like this. And just a new look. It doesn't mean that that's now off the noxious weed list. It means that, like, wow, there's a different shift, a perspective, and a use for it. Instead of like, you know, spray it with chemicals or dig it up and like throw it away. There's a use to all these weeds, and you know they're growing here. growing here for a reason. So I love that aspect. Things that people don't want or things that they're trying to actively get rid of because they don't realize the benefit of it.
Oh, totally.
So yeah, weeds are a great place to focus on. Some of those weeds are incredible herbs with a ton of value. Now, when it comes to your relationship with the land, be that, honoring, even indigenous knowledge and the wisdom, that becomes a personal thing, and can be part of your own practice. There's a lot of herbalists that, they like to offer tobacco. Okay, something about that, right? That resonates with them. That's definitely within a, Native American type of tradition. I've heard other herbalists that they'll offer like a strand of their hair. Whether you're offering something physical, I think that all starts from the place of, hey, I'm receiving, and being grateful. And I think it's, acknowledging and honoring a plant. I mean, most plants are not used to being, acknowledged, right? We tend to, you're as dumb as a vegetable, like plants in our kind of, the mass kind of psyche and consciousness, they're nuisances, they're pests, or they're just food, or they're things to like chop and clear. So as a wild forager and a herbalist, there's different awareness and different respect for plants. Now, is it there 100% all the time? That's the practice. That's the cultivation. And to always go out and forage, first and foremost, have a reason, have a purpose. Like, okay, I'm going out for this. Or if you go out and you're like, well, I'm just going to go see what I find, before you start picking, know why you're picking it. Okay, I'm going to pick, because I've seen a lot of people, just, oh, hey, we found this. And it's just, they picked a whole bunch. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And then they don't
waste it.
Like, that's such a waste, right? So if you do find something and you feel the call, it's like that checking in with self. People tell me they ask the plant. I'm not unfamiliar with that. The idea of asking permission from the plant. And then if there is something reciprocal, tobacco or your hair or, whatever it is that you want to give back and however you want to honor, I think that's a really key, important part of the practice. And then, maybe if somebody's like a criticism and it's a pushback, like we shouldn't be foraging. It's like, the impact, let's be realistic about it, like the impact of a forager, like even for myself, like I'm a big forager. I do it for myself. I do it commercially, more than the average person. It would take me multiple lifetimes of like full-time foraging to have the same level of impact as a clear cut, one section. Right? Like it's, there's so many other areas of our society and our life. And I'm not just saying that to kind of give myself a free pass, right? All the rest still includes in terms of being grateful. We work with our chaga supplier who supplies us many other wild foods. Like he specifically goes into a forest before a clear cut. He gets the heads up, like the whole, everything is just going to be absolutely decimated.
So he is able to take kind of whatever he can.
Right? Like go in, utilize this, make the most of it, like,
that's smart. It's surprising they don't already think to do that, but I guess they wouldn't.
We don't. Like we clear cut, we chop everything down, we take a fraction of what that ecosystem provides, which is typically like softwood lumber, depending on the area, but like, spruce trees, pine trees sold for $1 a tree to China, or made into fence posts, right? Like I'm not.
And they probably knock off all those mushrooms into the garbage. And
totally, In fact, there's so much more value, in an intact ecosystem, but everything that's in and around those trees that could be utilized.
Isn't that so funny that such a heavy capitalist practice of like clear cutting is missing a big element of the money they could be making? They should have a guy running around collecting the mushrooms. Actually, they shouldn't be clear cutting, but if they are clear cutting, they should at least be taking the stuff that's useful and healthful. And wow, that's crazy. But what could be more human than foraging, if you think about it, though?
Right? Yeah.
It's so much more natural than all these farms and things. Even that, which is also quite natural in many ways, but like you're just walking through the bush, getting stuff, and using it for your own well-being. I mean, that's
totally
where we started.
I was talking with Denis about this the other day, and he made reference, I don't know it exactly clearly, but something to the effect of, he made reference to this, Native American, quite an old elder, very wise, and he bet something to the effect of, because somebody was getting called out for like not being present or blah, 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 whatever. And he's like, when did you leave that state of prayer, and why? Like, shouldn't that be our state?
Yeah.
Every day, 24/7, you're always in that place. Yeah, I think that's what it was. There was a context where like, oh, but you didn't, do your little ritual. And he's like, well, what makes you think I'm out of ritual? Like I didn't perform this kind of outer things. Like, I'm always in that state, everything I do, and for some reason, I get it. Like, foraging can come under a little bit more of attack from people of like, well, how dare you, you're stealing, or you're not honoring. It's like, do you do that with every meal? Like when you go to the grocery store, like a loaf of bread is no less sacred than, in
a way,
a bundle of cedar, right? Like you've pulled from the landscape, and it's, especially when you talk about like farms and industrial agriculture, like way more devastation, way more destruction that happens, to the ecosystem. Everything that could have lived there, should have lived there, transformed into a monoculture crop. Chemicals applied, the whole 9 yards, and I get it. That's kind of the societal system that we've inherited, and we all do the best that we can make the choices we can to move that forward. And I feel like foraging is such a, like you say, a human, like ancestral thing. Like that's partly what I love about it, is like it feels real, it feels valuable, it feels meaningful. I feel more myself and I feel more human when I'm doing that.
Well, it's funny because we'll move on from this in a second, but even the whole notion of foraging being like a class that gets taught, it's a very like modern privileged way of being, because like the average person has never gone foraging.
Right.
How strange is that? Where do you get your food? Well, I don't know. I just go to Safeway or whatever, and there it is. I forage through the aisles, I suppose. But for it to, it's just become so distant from normal, but it's such a natural, necessary thing. So
here's another thing I do, to kind of give back, like acknowledging the plants, maybe there's some sort of physical offering, engaging in the practice, like, bringing awareness and honor to plants in general, right? To help shift kind of the modern consciousness that's so disconnected. Like that, I feel, is a role that I play as part of my giving back. The other thing I do is I plant these in my garden. Right? Like I've got a front yard, a backyard, a side yard, like full of these plants that I love, that I'm developing a relationship with. Maybe I use them, maybe I don't. Sometimes they're just there to kind of like be as an example, like show neighbors or do a video and just, hey, like check it out. Here's this plant. So I'm giving them a home and a habitat and like kind of honoring them that way as well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. If you're new to Light Cellar, you might not know, but like the whole place is sort of based around this. I noticed my cup today, a world that honors the sacredness of all life. And so, that's kind of the gist of the whole place, really. So, I think it's a perfectly good question. But like of all places, I think that you're really working to do a good job of honoring. I don't want to
this is about like, put on your pedestal, I'm so perfect, like,
congratulations on your honoring of the...
it's a practice. It's that like, I slip out of, presence all the time. So that's just being human.
So the next question here, this is a good one. And this one came from, you had a video on how to make your own hydrosols. It was a lavender hydrosol.
Oh, yeah.
And the person's asking, it's Marit Wallace. She says, or he, is this, can you use dried lavender or fresh lavender? And I'm not sure either. So is it okay to use one or the other, or should you use one or the other when making a hydrosol?
Okay, cool. And let's back up and see, what is a hydrosol, right?
Yeah.
If somebody's
I suppose
you're tuning in, hydrosol is basically it's an alchemical extraction of plant medicine. Like you can make teas, you can make tinctures, you can make salves, all these different forms of extraction. Hydrosol is through a steam or a hydrodistillation, and it creates, as the name suggests, a hydrosol solution. So a solution of these kind of aromatic compounds that get trapped in the water. So the essential oils are in there. And in creating them, there's a few different ways to make it, but we got these beautiful copper stills that are designed just for the process. And we create the hydrosols with that. Now I'll use both fresh and dried plant material. It really just depends on the plant. That specific batch of lavender that I used was dried, but it was sourced from an organic small family farm on Vancouver Island. It would have been great if it was fresh, but lavender dries really, really well. It was that year's harvest. So it was fresh. I could say it was freshly dried, in that way. And depending on the plant, right? Like frankincense as a resin, Palo Santo as a wood, witch hazel. I've never actually, worked with the fresh living material. So sometimes all you have access to is dried plant material. There can be benefits to utilizing fresh plant material because you're actually going to get all the intercellular water from that plant in that steam distillation. And sometimes the potency can just be that much more. I would say with lavender, it's probably minimal. It dries really well. It maintains such a potency. Then I think it's just a matter of time. How fresh is it from when it was first dried? And that one in particular was a dried lavender, and it made such a beautiful, beautiful hydrosol.
Amazing. And so for people who don't know, then how do you use a hydrosol? Because we kind of know what it is, but why or how it is, I guess.
Totally. Okay, well, there's all kinds of different applications with hydrosols. So it is water-based. They have generally an acidic pH, which is what actually our skin is, and our acid mantle, as it's called. So there's amazing applications for topical use of hydrosol. So for instance, rose hydrosol, amazing, kind of spritz on the skin. It's tonifying. It's astringent. And it, depending on the plant that you're using, like rose is really good for inflammation of any kind, or of heat or redness. It's very soothing. It's very calming. Again, it's tonifying, so it can help get rid of wrinkles or prevent wrinkles.
What are you saying there?
Not looking at you directly, but that's an example. Is using it topically. You can also use it, internally topically, let's say like frankincense and myrrh, just in the mouth. Like a lot of these plant compounds are antimicrobial, antibacterial, so it could be like a cleansing agent. Mint, sage, frankincense, those kinds of ones I could use on a toothbrush or as a mouth freshener, or just to kind of cleanse or maybe treat maybe an area that's not doing so good, right? A little bit of soreness or a bit of like infection, like very good because you can apply it directly. And they're safer and more gentle than an essential oil. Even though they contain essential oils, those are diluted into the water. Plus you get the other benefits as well, different than essential oils. So they both play a role. They're both good, but these can be a lot safer. Now, you can use them internally, like say mint hydrosol, just for the flavor, right? Or increasing digestion, or something like mint is actually known to be a refrigerant. So we know it's very cooling, right? Hot summer day, it's like or menopause,
Actually helps cool you down a little bit.
Does,
I feel interesting.
Yeah. So that really becomes like herb specific of what are the benefits and why would you use one. But you can consume most hydrosols. They can be, sipped just as is. They can be added to elixirs or hot chocolates, like the rose hydrosol we use a lot at the elixir bar, as a way to kind of bring that flavor and that essence that rose brings. And then I guess third would be aromatically, right? So like think of it as like a smokeless smudge. So if you had like a sage hydrosol or Palo Santo, a lot of people like incense. They could just be to kind of, perfume a room very naturally, or it could be literally to kind of clear the energetics.
I've heard of that,
Yeah.
It's like a foraged Febreze.
Right? Yeah, it's like we have one called Forest Essence, and that's fresh. I harvest fresh cedar, Douglas fir, other types, noble fir, white pine, hemlock. We'll do a mix of different kind of forest trees, and it's like, we all know how good it feels to be in the forest.
Yeah.
This is just like, and it's like.
And what's interesting to me, though, is like I'm a person who I respond really severely to a lot of scents, but I find if they're truly natural scents, like how could you be bothered by a fresh forest around, but people will put on those scented candles from wherever, and it gets me going, and I just, it's not good at all. But this is the actual essence of the forest.
Totally.
That's so cool.
So if you're into forest bathing, but you can't quite make it out to the forest,
There
you
we
still
go.
got to work your 9 to 5.
At your cubicle.
No, totally.
Yeah, no, I laugh, but I'm going to do it.
bring the forest in.
Yeah.
It can be a great way. Like maybe the person next to you, has worn that horrible cologne.
Yeah,
right? It's like,
yeah.
Forest field.
Neutralize. Forest field. Yeah.
Yeah, forest field.
Forest
there we go.
field.
We'll have to create one with all like the field herbs as well here.
Here it comes. Where'd that come from? What a great idea.
It could be like I've seen like little deodorant.
Oh really? Yeah.
Kind of a natural like light perfume. Even like rose on the face after a shower. Like it tightens up the skin. It's tonifying. And then like I might wash my face at the end of the day, and it's just like I can still smell the rose. It wasn't quite as prevalent during the day, but it sticks with you.
That's interesting. Yeah, and there's so many too. So this is one of those things where even if you're not living in Calgary, like you maybe can't come foraging with Malcolm, but online, a lot of these products are available and to be shipped too.
We keep expanding the selection. I mean, it's pretty unlimited. The very last ones that I did were hops. That was brand new. Never done a hops hydrosol before, and those were some kind of locally foraged hops that were grown organically, and we turned that into hydrosol. And there's just so many.
That's a cool one. Yeah, for sure. So check that out.
One last application of kind of aromatics is it can also help drop dust out of the air. It can also help clear kind of electromagnetic frequencies, like static, charge, like you're in the office. Or there's servers in the room, that kind of thing. Like it adds moisture, it drops positive
Does it matter which one, or is it just kind of a general feature?
General, yeah. Okay. But you can also get specific as well. Like that's where I might use like an Artemisia sage species or the Palo Santo.
Okay.
And then also like microbes, bacteria, viruses, that type of thing.
In the air.
Take those out too.
Interesting. So. Yeah, well, it sounds like it's interesting. So many uses, but people don't know.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess in certain communities they do, but it's these kind of products that you kind of wish would overtake some of the mainstays. Like I was joking about Febreze. Febreze is so toxic.
Oh gosh.
They're like, put this in your air, put this on your couch, and then sit on it. Oh God, it's bad for you. Yeah.
Dryer sheets, like that kind of thing. Like if you want to iron something and you want to like freshen it up, instead of just like water in your ironing thing, you just or
that's a great idea.
Your child's going to sleep. You just want to kind of like set the mood with the room, or spray their pillow with something like that.
Yeah. Great idea.
Yeah.
So many uses.
No, totally.
So speaking of kind of locally foraged ingredients, this person was asking about, there was a video where you did about pine pollen.
Yeah.
And someone in the video had said they doubled their testosterone. And so the person's asking, Mark Baloghi, something like that, to double the testosterone, did you use cracked cell or uncracked cell pine pollen? So first of all, maybe we should explain kind of what that means, because I'm not quite sure. But then also, is the pine pollen that's offered in stores, Canadian sourced? Where does it come from? That kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Great questions. So my first introduction to this idea of like crack cell wall came in through chlorella. So chlorella it's a microalgae, blue-green algae that theory is it's not as digestible as it could be because it has this like kind of tough cell wall. So what they'll do is, in the manufacturing of it, they'll crack it so it makes the nutrients more bioavailable. I think that's less of a concern for spirulina. People have been consuming spirulina for like hundreds of years, no problem, very nutritive. Okay, with chlorella, there seems to be some benefit to be able to access more of the nutrients. I think with pine pollen, and just to kind of back up, what is that? That's that yellow dust in the spring. It comes off the pine trees. It's the pollen. It's the reproductive part. It is extremely nutritive, and it actually acts somewhat like a hormonal substance. It's a phytoandrogen, like it can help build testosterone, balance hormones. It's unbelievable. We have an incredible book downstairs in the shop all about pine pollen. A whole book just on pine pollen. Like that's how much this one herb has going on for it. So a friend of mine, and the video that we're referring to here, he was getting near 50, realizing that maybe his drive and things wasn't quite as it should be. Heard about pine pollen, tried it after going to see his doctor, confirming, testosterone is low. And unfortunately, this is an issue in our kind of greater society where they're showing that, like, you know, even young men, like, don't have the testosterone levels that us as males used to have in previous times. And there's a whole kinds of reasons for that. I mean, that's a whole other topic that we could dive into, is like, why do we have an epidemic of low testosterone?
Yeah. Well, I heard it, and I have the study here or whatever, but something like people in their 20s today have the same testosterone that their grandfathers had when they were like 50.
Yeah, totally.
And I found that very surprising, you know.
Yeah, that's not right. You know? And there's all kinds of reasons, but, you know, regardless of what you start with, like, testosterone naturally declines, you know, for men as we age. And so he was noticing that, and pine pollen is, hands down, I would say, the best herb for boosting that. So with his test results low, he took pine pollen, 2 weeks on it, went and got tested. He had doubled his levels.
In 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's that with kind of lab results. Anecdotally, you know, there's tons and tons of backing the efficacy of pine pollen. So the question was, did he take cracked cell wall? No, he didn't, actually. And so I'm not a big believer in the necessity of cracked cell pine pollen, just for that alone. Like, you know, okay, maybe you might get a slight edge principle from that. I think the key might lie in regular powder versus tincture. So he took a tincture form, which alcohol and the high percentage that it was, about 70-75%, would, you know, essentially break open those cells and the nutrients, it was all available, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I actually happen to know a little bit about this too, because I took pine pollen for a while myself. Because I was severely losing my hair. Now I'm still kind of losing my hair, and I should probably get on it again. But it actually did help. Like, it's become a little bit more thick. And but the thing that I read, or that I heard, or that I tried, is that if you crack the cell wall, then it starts to oxidize really fast, and you lose way more nutrients. So yes, it's more nutritive, but it drops so fast and so quickly from its prime. So what you can do is what I tried anyways, is you take the uncracked, just the pollen, and you just let it sit overnight, and then have it in the morning, and then it's cracked open, and then you get you crack it yourself, basically.
Okay, cool.
Something about it getting wet, it just kind of breaks open the outer shell or something, and then you just drink it with I would just put it in my coffee. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Cool,
and
that makes total
surprisingly refreshing. Like, we were talking about the forest earlier.
Yeah.
You put a half teaspoon of that in your coffee in the morning and stir it up. It's a bit of an odd taste at first. Maybe not for coffee for everybody, but I found it kind of like a nice sort of sprucey taste in the coffee, piney. Yeah, it was really interesting, and you get used to it right away, and you start to crave it. Like, oh, I forgot the pine pollen in my coffee today.
Because you feel it, you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's energizing too.
Yeah.
You feel it right away. I don't know if that's normal, but it's kind of a uplifting, food.
And you think about its role in the ecosystem. It's reproductive for the pine tree, but it actually acts as this, like, spring tonic. It's why, like, everything in the ecosystem, including humans, like, we're breathing it in, we're eating it. It blankets all the ground everywhere. And they have shown in studies with, like, bean sprout plants that literally just adding, like, micrograms of this stuff, like, the growth rate of
it
the
helps.
bean sprouts. Yeah, so it's
that makes sense. It coats nature would adapt to that. This coating comes every spring.
Yeah. It's a growth stimulant. It's like, you know, a spring tonic. It's aphrodisiac. Like, it's all these things that just stimulates, coming to life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's amazing. And when you have it in like an alcohol in a tincture form, and, you know, if you get into the book, Stephen Herdbiner, the author, he gets into specifics about, you know, who's the powder for and its benefits when and how would you take it, tincture, this distinction there. It makes much more of the androgenic and hormonal compounds, like, available. So tincture perfectly preserves it. So you'd have that bioavailability without the degradation of it. But yeah, it's much more, especially the androgens are much more kind of freely available in a tincture form, but not necessarily recommended for anybody that isn't already noticing signs of, you know, like, you don't want 18-year-old bro going like, I'm going to get jacked, you know, and it's like, because, if you start, it's like steroids in that sense, because it has literally steroid-like compounds, totally safe and legal, but, you know, it can have the same negative effects if you're abusing it in that way. So, it's kind of a medicine for if and when you need it.
So is it Canadian then, and can women take it then? That just
Right.
popped into my head.
Yeah, totally. So women can take it because women obviously, have testosterone, and it could be, I knew one woman that she was in her 40s and she got into like weightlifting competition. So she was using it. I know a lot of women that have used it to kind of balance their hormones, just give them a little bit more kind of focus and drive, and yeah, so it's primarily a male herb, however, certainly can be utilized by women. And yes, is it Canadian sourced? We have a number of different options in the shop. We carry Harmonic Arts and New Earth Organics. Both those are Chinese sourced because they're the largest producer of it. And those are both good high quality, but what I prefer and what we source here is I personally wild harvest it. So it's all from the local ecosystem that we put into tincture, and then other things like syrups, but primarily we'll usually always have tincture. And then there's another company called Canadian Pine Pollen, and it's all wild Canadian sourced too.
It's in the name.
Yeah.
In that case, it's in the name. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the next question you kind of touched on was concentration and focus. This is sort of all about that. Like she's saying, Laura Larson is the name here. But my mind keeps racing in so many directions, brain gaps, pauses of thought. I start thinking something and forget it. Like, what can something help with this?
Yeah, well, let's always start with, just kind of foundational. I mean, like, welcome to the club, you're human. I spent a long time kind of in my late teens, early 20s meditating. And that was the whole thing. It's like, focus on your breath. Like your mind just like it wanders. That's what the mind does. And so, of course, having lifestyle practices like that, mindfulness practices, meditation practices, it's something that's so invaluable to really cultivate that in oneself, to develop focus. So first and foremost, don't feel bad about that. There are practices, and then I get it. Probably where the question's actually coming from is they had a certain level of focus, and that's waning. That's being challenged. That could be due to stress. It could be signs of adrenal burnout, right? Like that's one of the indications. It's just like you're at your wit's end. You just cannot handle things in the same way that you could once upon a time. So I would say adaptogens, number one. Whether stress and adrenal burnout or adrenal burnout, if it's that extreme, the adaptogens will help. If it's just stress, you're not at that extreme stage, they'll help as well, right? They help the body adapt to stressful circumstances, normalizing bodily functions. Like when we get into that fight or flight, that's a whole like cascade of chemistry, the HPA axis, and these adaptogens help kind of temper the response, but also like bring the body back to balance more quickly afterwards. So you're just like, you don't have that like for longer. And then within that, there's a whole other class of herbs called the nootropics.
So first, what are the adaptogens? Like I'm thinking the only one I know is ashwagandha, really. I mean, what else would that be?
Yeah, totally. Rhodiola.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I've talked to 2 women in the last 2 days. One lady yesterday, she's like, this changed my life.
Really?
Like adaptogens, not only for kind of mental focus, also energy. She says it's even helping, as she goes through menopause. And, what I love about adaptogens, it's not just one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like kind of a multitude of benefits. They're not single actions. They work on many different organs and systems within the body. So it's really kind of, helping overall health versus like, just my kidneys or whatever. So adaptogens, reishi mushroom, ashwagandha, rhodiola, eleuthero, holy basil. There's a big long list. We have tons in store in all the different forms, to make tea, to just take as tincture, capsules, you name it. So there's variety in the different forms, and then we got lots of books. If you like you mentioned, like, okay, ashwagandha, like that's that one that's kind of landed with you that you know about. Let's say if somebody is exactly the same, because I know that's a herb that's out there on a lot of people's minds. come. Like, just, you don't need to buy the book. You can just kind of browse through it. You can ask one of the shop staff members, like, hey, give me your thoughts on ashwagandha, right? Start to build a bit more kind of depth of understanding, but most importantly, start to take it, begin to experiment with it. The adaptogens are very safe herbs to begin with and begin to incorporate daily, because they're not going to like throw you off. They're not going to like, oh, take my medication and like, yeah, they're really kind of balancing. They're very tonifying in that regard. So we got lots of books, and then there's one specifically, it's David Winston, Adaptogens for Stress, Stamina, and what's the other? Strength, Stamina, and Stress Relief. Great title, really kind of captures what adaptogens are all about. That's a great book to reference. And then in there, he's got a mention of what we call the nootropics, Nootropic, nootropic. And these are herbs that are specific to, the brain, the nervous system, focus, memory, concentration. Rosemary. Just as one example, right?
Thanksgiving's coming up. It's a perfect time.
Yeah, so rosemary, just, as a common, like, even culinary herb, right, is known to have these kind of great, brain benefits for focus, for memory. Lion's mane as a medicinal mushroom. Also, there's not only is there lots of studies, but anecdotally, I mean, just spending a few days on the floor, like, easily, at least once a week, we get coming in, like, raving about lion's mane, taking it, sharing about its benefits. So we hear that a lot anecdotally, and certainly the research supports that. So there's other ones: ginkgo biloba, CocaCola, brahmi, bacopa. Those are kind of some of the top ones.
Cool. That's a good answer. I've actually had that. Couple of those. It's Go-To-Cola, not Coca-Cola, by the way. Don't start drinking your Coca-Cola, hoping to make you more frazzle. What's in there? They used to put back in the day, it was real cocaine or something in that. But
no, actually,
no, it wasn't. Is that a myth? Is that an urban myth?
It's real. So Coca-Cola, the original formula was actually in wine. It was called Vin Mariani.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it was in vogue. It was in fashion. Like Sigmund Freud was a cokehead, in the sense that he was big into coca leaf. One of the most amazing herbs on the planet. It's one of my favorite herbs. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's considered a class 1 narcotic.
Well, once you process it down, I guess it can. That's the problem. I think a lot of these things are problems of like our modern society processing them.
Yeah, for sure. We're isolating one single alkaloid called cocaine in a really like nasty way.
We could probably do that with caffeine too if we tried, but people,
So actually Coca-Cola still to this day contains coca. They're one of the only legal importers of coca leaf into North America.
So it still contains it?
No, they removed the cocaine.
I see.
They sell that to the pharmaceutical industry. Like, it's a multi-million, hundred millions of dollars business every single year. So it's decoconized, but it's still got some good properties and benefits.
Interesting.
And then cola nut, so that's the coca. Then there's cola, which is cola nut, which is one of the highest caffeine containing herbs on the planet. And then there's all kinds of other botanicals like orange and lime and nutmeg, and I mean, it's a secret recipe. But,
so wait, should we be drinking Coca-Cola?
No. I don't know now. It's a modern bastardized version of what was once an incredible herbal tonic.
That's interesting that it would have the roots of being such a tonic and turn into such a problem.
So Coke is amazing.
Really interesting. Root beer too, you mentioned. Of course, that would be the point, is made from roots, right?
Sassafras, sarsaparilla. There's different formulas to create root beer, but what an amazing spring tonic, and that's what it was used as originally. And the cream sodas were actually like vanilla with whey. Like it had a dairy component, and we could go on the list of all these different, sodas today that have their roots in herbal medicine.
I don't drink much pop and stuff, but the exceptions I will make are like natural ones, kind of like you make here, and some of them are like fermented and stuff even too, exactly. I think, and super cool. Yeah. So speaking of, was the last question really, but what is recommended for spring, summer sinus and colds creeping up? But we can talk about that for fall, I suppose.
Sure. I mean, maybe, spring sinus stuff, like oftentimes people get a lot of allergies. So one of the best spring tonics is nettles.
Like stinging nettles.
Stinging nettles, they're actually antihistamine. They can really help with seasonal allergies. Reishi mushroom is another good one. That's good for seasonal allergies or just allergies in general. And then bee pollen, especially from your kind of local environment, that will help you kind of attune. But then if it's more kind of like cold, that flu, that type of thing, like, it's that transition where we're back inside more. It's the heated air, the recycled air. We're not getting the fresh air. It's a shift of routine. It's getting darker. I mean, it just happens, and I think underlying that all, sometimes the body just wants a break, okay, you're not going to rest. I'm gonna force
Make you rest.
Yeah, or a cleanse to just kind of like, especially the spring. It's like, okay, I'm coming out of that deep winter. I need to shed some stuff. People are like, no, still in my routine. So, I always put that out there because, hey, we're human, and I know in the health world it's like, I never get sick. It's like, oh, really?
How's that possible? Yeah.
So it is a part of life. But yeah, there's lots of things we can do, lifestyle-wise, as well as herbal support. So I think about, broths. I think about elderberry, syrup as an example. Different herbs, or fire cider. That's kind of another like kitchen remedy. That can be like onions and garlic and chilies, and you can make them all different kinds of ways. And that's like, like that heat, that like cleanse, clear the sinuses.
Yeah.
And then you can also look at, like I mentioned, more the kind of antiviral route with like your lemon balms and your andrographis and your elderberry. Maybe overall, like, year round would be like medicinal mushrooms. Again, more like that adaptogen, that tonic, tonifying, strengthening the immune system long term. And then it's like, oh, tickle in the throat. It's like you bring out the big guns, like the andrographis, like try and nip it in the bud at that time.
The poplar one you were talking about, I think, too, for the throat or something. It was great.
Yeah, poplar bud. That's one of my
tried that one.
Favorites.
Actually, very delicious, too. I was surprised.
Yeah, and in fact, that reminds me of bee propolis. So a lot of people are really into propolis, like sprays, for sore throat, like that scratchiness, that that's what propolis is made from, is the poplar bud. Resin, resins from trees, so it has a very similar action that way.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, I hope that you learned a lot today. I definitely did, and I guess keep the questions rolling in on the YouTube channel. But if you're listening on another podcasting platform, which email should we get people to send to?
Oh, they can send it to info at Light Cellar if you got a question, or if you're watching a video or you're listening to a podcast, send us that comment. Put it down below. We'll pick it up. We might not respond right away or directly there, but yeah.
And that was info@lightcellar.ca, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Well, I want to read one last comment that came in. This person said, and I think they're referring to your Blaine Andrusic series, the herbal conversations that you've been having with him. It said, best interview podcast ever. So yeah, check some of those ones out. And I think there's more to come. So
are you sure they weren't referring to the one where you interviewed me that first
I don't know if it was... Maybe it should have been. I don't know. But yeah, I think we did good. Yeah, we did pretty well on that. But
that's what inspired this one. So I think we got more of these to come. The podcast, it's kind of a growing, evolving thing. And I think we're just getting started. So.
Absolutely. And you can check it out on YouTube, or I think I just said the audio version too on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Should be there too. So awesome.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to give us a like, share this with someone you know who would benefit, and subscribe so you're up to date with all the new episodes coming out. You can shop online at lightcellar.ca, as well as visit us in the heart of Bowness in Calgary, Alberta.